Welcome to ICCG's Close-Up, sponsored by Round World Solutions, where Fortune 1000 CXOs share their enterprise strategies for competing and winning in the global economy. Our wide-ranging topics include big data, governance, supply chain analytics, enterprise mobility, and portfolio management. The goal of our interviews is to understand the CXO's area of focus, the challenges associated with that area, and their plans for confronting those challenges. The benefit to our participants is the creation of a virtual CXO knowledge pool, so CXOs can learn from each other and not have to reinvent the wheel. I'm your host, Ellis Booker. Welcome to ICCG's Close-Up, sponsored by Round World Solutions, the leader in integrated governance with program execution. I'm your host, Ellis Booker. Today we're delighted to have Scott Kahn, VP of Commercial Enterprise Informatics at Illumina. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Ellis. How you doing?
Helping me ask Scott some questions today, we have Round World Solutions partner Steve Winstead on the call. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Ellis. Hello, Scott. Glad to be here.
Scott, we're going to be asking you some questions around your career, which bridges both IT and the business side, which I think is very interesting for our audience. But could you start us off by telling us a little bit about Illumina and your role there today?
Sure. Illumina very recently has broadened out into the informatics space, and that was to provide a better avenue for the various sequencing and sequencing-related products that we sell. And in that regard, I took on a challenge of trying to commercialize the informatics platforms that we were creating, and I saw that as something that was both exciting and kind of a natural extension of what I had been doing for the last 10 years here at Illumina.
In fact, you moved from a CIO role to the business side. Now you're involved with product development, marketing, customer support. Can you help us understand how your earlier life in IT has informed your work now?
Yeah, two things. So one, I need to take a half step back and say that before I came to Illumina, I was in the business side. I was part of a commercial software activity. So for me, that was a very comfortable space to be. Working as the CIO at Illumina, realizing that we grew from a very small, more startup-oriented company to the leader in sequencing instruments and reagents that we are today, that I learned a lot about what customers were actually trying to use the technology to do. And so for me, this was quite natural that to put a lot of effort into making sure that the sequencing was robust, was reliable, lower cost, and now it's to the point where people want to use the data, and that really goes back into the informatics world. So for me, it was a perfectly timed confluence of extension of what Illumina was doing and naturally mixing back to what I've done in my past. So for me, it was an interesting new step in my career.
Great. Before we drill into some questions around what Illumina is doing, some initiatives you're involved with, I did want to ask you if you have any advice for colleagues who might be facing that same sort of career move from a purely IT role to one that's in the business side. Do you have any do's and don'ts for these people?
Well, I might have a different perspective since I wasn't a career CIO. I came from the business world going into a CIO role. I thought it was quite appropriate that you come from a more business setting and then you move into that technology leadership role, that it's not a role necessarily for life, although one can make it that. And so for me, being able to learn about the infrastructure, what you need to support the business, was a great way to learn for me about a brand new market area. and then branching back into the business, but for me a different market than I came from, was a natural. So for a non-career CIO, this is maybe a normal path. For someone who's spent their entire life in technology, it's something that if they really feel strongly about their business is, that it's a wonderful opportunity if they are up for the challenge.
Okay. Scott, can you tell us now about some of the big data and advanced analytics work that you're doing at Illumina?
Yes, big data and big data analytics is something that I think has a very long-standing role here at Illumina. For the last 6 or 7 years, we worked on an initiative that we called the Genome Informatics Alliance, which brought together people, researchers that were trying to use genomics to answer some of the more interesting and vexing questions in the clinical and in the agricultural worlds. At the time, they were discussing how to handle all the image data that was being created, and they mused over whether or not it would be possible to use something in double quotes called the cloud. Of course, it was dismissed pretty quickly, only to be revisited each and every year, to the point where we realized that that was a very useful way forward, and that now that's what people are doing, not so much with image data, but very much with the process data that comes out of sequencing experiments, mixed with all the clinical information that is known about a patient, for example. And at its heart, that's how we see the initiatives in personalized medicine evolving. So when I think of big data, I think about the complexity of the kinds of data that people are assembling to answer the very topical problems in medicine, and I see those being intimately related to Illumina's business and how we see Illumina's business evolving in the future.
Very good. I think Steve has a follow-up. Steve?
Yes, Scott. Could you tell us about how you're getting business people to actually use these advanced analytic tools?
Yeah, it's what I'd say both business people and maybe even more broadly the non-informatics groups that are out there realize that in our world there's also a group of individuals that really deeply understand biology and medicine, for example, but they don't understand the details of informatics. And so I think one of the tricks is to make it accessible. And accessibility is a way of stating ease of use, in ease of use for the individual, not in a broad sense, but very specifically, how do you provide the right information in a tool and into an environment that allow them to navigate the way that they find comfortable and allows them to find the answers that are there. So another way of saying it, not everyone navigates or gravitates, I should say, to Excel as the environment of choice. Many do, and so you need to have the Excel, you need to have the other tools that let everyone have access to data that lets them explore it and interact with it in the way they find comfortable.
And what would you say are some of the key challenges that your customers are facing as they try and utilize these tools?
So I think one of the key challenges is around the cleanliness or the completeness of their data. It's hard to get through any discussion of bringing together clinical information around a patient, including their genomic information, without asking how standardized, how harmonized is that information. And that's, I see, a challenge that's going to go forward. It's not an easily fixed problem. Unfortunately, it's something that many are really focused on right now.
And what advice can you offer on how you would start these projects?
Well, it's always good to start with a couple of good examples of where it's worked well. It's really good to start with other customers that have had success in accomplishing not only the specific task, but also in helping change within their organization through the platform that you're using. So, you know, obviously these are probably true of any field, but especially so in one that blends the analytics with the science and ultimately comes back to the business of whether it's really having an impact.
Excellent, excellent. Could you, moving on into sort of some questions around governance, could you tell us about some of the data governance and the processes that you've instituted?
Yeah, around data governance, for us it's both governance, but there's also the whole notion of consent. Data around humans is needing to be managed by the individual who it's measured on. So, part of the data governance involves knowing whether or not that information can be broadly shared and how it can be accessed and by whom. So, in our specific field, that is in the area where people are looking at how to advance personalized medicine. The whole issue of data governance in terms of access is probably one of those problems that will constantly evolve over the years ahead as both patients understand it better, who to give access to, and as organizations understand how best to leverage the access that is made available.
And could you give us some insight into what things that you're measuring, some of the key measurements that you're capturing?
Boy, some of them are pretty rudimentary. So things just as simple as how complex is the information that exists for individual records. And I think that's an area where we believe that having very rich information about each patient or each record has great benefit. We also measure how many people are using the data, how frequently do they use the data. We obviously are not able, or should we, look at exactly what they're doing with the data, but just usage, frequency of use, residents on the system, and metrics of those sorts that we find quite useful.
Interesting. And I understand you also have been utilizing the Agile methodology. How has that gone for you?
Gone very well. Gone very well. In many respects, Agile is something that's been around for well over a decade. It seems to get a new name every couple years, and right now the popular one is Agile. The notion of having a team that comes together on a regular basis that discusses how they're solving the problem and exactly what they've solved, that whole intimate nature of the iterative development process tied very closely with a product owner and with process is one that we see working very well and is, in some respects, the natural reflection of how the software development world has evolved.
Scott, moving on to our final set of questions, can you tell us what, say, your top 2 priorities are at Illumina for the coming year?
Boy, well, for Illumina as a company, obviously, Illumina as a company is much broader than the informatics area that I'm working. I think we really have a focus on trying to improve and impact human health by unlocking the power that is inherent in the human genome. So they're all activities that you can imagine, getting better access to data to more people and providing them a richer informatics environment with which to do it are probably the number 1 and number 2 areas. If I had to pick a second, just asked for 2, I'd say we'd really like to very specifically have an impact on both oncology and reproductive health. And they are areas that we have had a big impact, but we see it as something that is very important to us and what we're trying to impact in the world.
And also, Scott, a final sort of follow-up question. What do you see as the customers' top priorities for the upcoming year in terms of what they're sharing with you as their priorities?
Well, so obviously we have many different customers. If you're a customer that's working in the pharmaceutical world, specifically on the translational groups within those world, they want to discover better, more effective therapeutics that can help cure disease. If you're working in a clinical setting and you have access to all of the therapeutics that are out there, you want to discover a better protocol on average, but you really want to discover a better protocol for each and every patient that walks in the door, and that's what people mean by precision or for personalized medicine. And if you're a researcher, you want to understand more deeply the biology. You want to find crops that grow when they don't get rain. You want to find crops that are resistant to disease. You want to find better ways to prevent malaria from spreading. It's kind of all these problems that fundamentally are linked to biology, and that's what they're, each of them will have their own focus, but they're the kinds of big problems that our customers are trying to solve right now.
And that'll have to be our last answer. I want to thank Scott Kahn of Illumina for joining us today. This has been ICCG's Close Up. If you'd like to watch other interviews, please go to iccgusa.com or visit the roundworldsolutions.com website. There you can also join the discussion or reach out to us to be an interview candidate yourself. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye.
I'm Scott Cunningham, Senior Director, Solutions and Delivery for Round World Solutions, the experts in integrated governance with project execution. Our unique 360-degree view enables us to give CXOs a comprehensive view of where they are today, where they would like to be, and delivers a powerful change management structure to ensure they accomplish their goals. ICCG Close-Up is an interview panel where CXOs share their views on big data, governance, and their most pressing issues. At the conclusion of the interviews, we will be compiling the results into an industry and issue-specific report to share with all of the interviewees, emphasizing common interests and future plans associated with those interests across industries. The benefits to our participating CXOs are the creation of a virtual CXO interactive knowledge base, highly scaled shared resources, and the ability to learn from each other without having to reinvent the wheel. Thank you for watching ICCG's Close-Up, sponsored by Round World Solutions. For more information about our CXO interview panels or to join the conversation, please visit us at www.roundworldsolutions.com. Thank you.